The Scream Kings are in no way responsible for any encounters with the paranormal, extraterrestrial abductions, eldritch insanity, hauntings, curses, hexes, demonic possessions, cryptozoological sightings, or any loss of sleep that results from listening to this podcast.
This is the Scream Kings podcast. I'm Nathaniel Darkish.
And this is Max George.
Holy shit, he's after me, and he's got a knife. And the worst part is...
You teach your podcast about slashers and you still walk down a dark alley alone.
Honestly, this sounds like a Friday night.
I mean, yeah, it does. For us, yes, that is just... I was going to say walk in the park, but no, it's a walk in a dark alley alone. All right, well, we are talking one of the newer horror movies recently. It did take us a little bit longer than ideal to actually get this one on the books, but we are talking Scream 6.
Yes, I feel like the delay has been my fault. I decided to do something crazy and buy a house.
Yes.
So I am now a full functioning adult in society, and it is exhausting.
It seems exhausting. I am not at that point, despite my best efforts. But yeah, no, that's freaking awesome, and yeah, that definitely has put a little bit of a slowdown on our recording schedule and our going to Evil Dead Rise Together schedule, but hey, now we can say that we've done both of those things.
All of the things have been accomplished. It's been an awesome, exciting time. There's just so much. You know, I remember SOHCAHTOA and how to calculate angles in different types of triangles, but the house buying process still confuses me. So, way to go, educational system.
I mean, to be fair, I think it confuses most people who work in that profession, honestly. Well, I mean, I'm sure I haven't helped our schedule at all with it being towards the end of the school year and, you know, me dealing with all of the fun stuff with that. So, you know, have 8 million things coming up, which will probably delay our next batch for when we talk Evil Dead Rise, probably with our next episode. Fingers crossed. Because we watched that together just barely, and I have thoughts. But we're not talking about that one today. We are talking Scream 6.
I had this secret. There's a darkness inside of me. It followed me here. And it's gonna keep coming for us. We share a certain history. This isn't like any other ghost face.
What is this place?
A shrine. We've got to lure him in. We execute him.
Hello?
Let's play a game.
You know you're like the 10th guy to try this, right? It never works out for the dipshit in the mask.
Maybe. But there's never been one like me, Gale.
So, I guess I could give us just a little bit of the basic, you know, who made this movie info. It was directed by Matt Bettolini-Olfen and Tyler Gillette, I think, or maybe Gillett. I do not know how to pronounce his last name. And then written by James Vanderbilt and Guy Busick, which I believe is just the same team that made Scream 5, but, you know, not Scream 5, just Scream. Again. I still have feelings about that, but you've already heard me share those previously, and it was kind of part of the plot, but still, regardless, it's hard to talk about Scream 5 without just calling it Scream 5.
Well, and I think when I think about the Scream franchise, of course, the irony is, right, that they always kind of follow the same pattern, but then they change the flavor or the spices or the environment. It really at its core is the same film, which maybe is a testament to how like long lasting it is and how great the Scream franchise really is. And I guess all I'm saying is you don't need to have a ton of background, I think, for Scream 5, Scream 4, Scream 3 to really have a good time in this film.
Though the more you know, the better I think this film does land in terms of how it's kind of playing off of the idea of the legacy and the killers that came before and all of that. In a way that's probably a little bit more direct than a lot of the previous other films, which, I mean, none of them have ignored what came before by any means, but this one definitely, has a mystery that's playing with that idea, which is a lot of fun.
Yes, I fully agree, but I did see this film with my sister who hasn't seen a single Scream episode, and she had just as much fun as those of us who had seen all of the Scream franchises. So yeah. I do think it has kind of this lasting power that Scream really has captured in a bottle.
Yeah, Scream is really one of those horror series, one of a very small handful of horror series that really hasn't delivered anything bad. Yes, Scream 3 is a weak point, and we've talked about that ad nauseum when we talked about the previous film, but at its core, yeah, Scream is really by far one of the strongest horror franchises. And I really enjoy how this one kind of brings a lot of familiar to the table, but also has a lot of really fun, unique things for this film in particular, outside of just, the basics of, hey, it's Scream, but in New York. Which, by the way, why is that always New York specifically?
Why not Albuquerque, New Mexico?
I mean, yeah, clearly people love that Albuquerque after the hit 1990 song Albuquerque by Weird Al Yankovic. As Breaking Bad.
I'm agreeing with you because it's New York, it's Los Angeles, it's Chicago, whatever. I want to see a high caliber horror set in Beantown. I mean, Beantown's another name for Chicago. That's a poor example. But Kanab, Utah. Let's go there. There's some darkness in Kanab, I bet.
I mean, well, and that's the thing is that it's always either small town that they kind of make up their own, or it's the Big Apple, and it's nothing in between, right? Even running into Chicago or Boston or all of these other kind of major American cities, LA being the only kind of notable exception. This is the destination. Freaking Jason has gone to New York. This is the go-to place where eventually you have your franchise go to New York and also space. And I for one am looking forward to Scream in space. But I don't know. I've never understood why it has to be New York City specifically. I know it's obviously a really cool iconic city, but there is so many other really interesting places that might offer something we haven't seen before. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Nathaniel, have you been to New York City before?
I have not.
I've been a few times, with work events or passing through different places. And I mean, it has so much nostalgia and culture, and it is the city of the United States. But after about 2 days in the city, I'm ready to go. Sorry, all my New York listeners. I would really appreciate, in the same vein where we have a lot of different possession movies out there, that they tackle different cultured, demonic possession. why not expand a little bit? Let's go see Possession in the Midwest or a Poltergeist in the South. Like, let's mix it up a bit, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And, even though I really liked this movie and its setting, I thought worked really in some interesting ways for this series in particular, I would love to see a bigger mix-up just for the sake of being a horror fan who... I've seen the horror movies in New York. There's 800,000 of them. Okay, well, setting aside, let's just kind of dig into like what we liked about this movie, right? So, right off the bat, this movie is way more brutal than most other Scream movies, and I thought it was in a way that actually really worked for the film and for the storytelling and all of that.
Yeah, I think the best thing that this Scream did is it took a lot of the great elements of its predecessor, but then also harkened back to a lot of the real terror and grit of the entire franchise, and really seemed to marry those quite well. The kills, the slasher components, they were pretty solid. I mean, there's a scene where poor lady is crawling across a ladder in an alleyway, and Ghostface at the time, who we don't know, is shaking the ladder up and down, which, in my puny world mind view, I thought, well, duh, that is what someone would do if they were trying to kill someone crossing a ladder in between the alley. And it's really intense. The terror is pretty high velocity, and she ultimately falls off the ladder, and you watch the whole gritty fall into a dumpster.
Yeah. Oof.
And that's like first third of the film. And I worry sometimes with slashers. We all know how Max feels about slashers and the immortality of the slasher gods. But what this movie I felt did really well is they came out kicking, and they kept kicking throughout the entire film.
Yes.
Oftentimes with slashers, we get some big gore, some big scare right in the beginning, and then they take a piss for the rest of the movie and don't really get any more scary until the very end, if that. But Scream 6 in particular, I think, does it very well. The terror runs throughout. There's the camp moments, there's the comedy, all of that. But really, Ghostface is a threat in this film. I'm even thinking of the Tienda scene where he comes in and just like picks up a fucking shotgun and is like blasting apart the chip aisle and the cookie aisle, and we haven't really seen that from Ghostface before. I thought that was cool.
Yeah. It's funny because I know online, when you kind of see that in some of the trailers, there was a lot of kind of pushback against that. Ghostface uses a knife. He doesn't, he isn't using guns, which really isn't that true. One, we actually see many Ghostfaces use guns at different points as well. It's usually just that, not while they are in full garb. It's usually more once they've revealed themselves, they bust out the guns. But I loved it that element because, yeah, like in this case, he's gonna do whatever works. And I mean, I guess he or she. There are 4 Ghostfaces in this movie, setting new records for this series. And yeah, like all of them are really just doing whatever will be most brutal, most effective. And I think that's actually kind of more true to kind of what Scream is in terms of being more grounded in reality than a lot of these other slashers to a certain extent and all that. And so I liked that. I thought it made it scarier because it wasn't just like, oh, well, as long as they're out of reach of a knife, they're going to be okay until the final, sequence. No, like freaking people are getting wasted, from shotgun blasts to the face left and right. Yes, there's stabbing, but there's also, all of these other kills that are very effective and really kind of get under your skin. Along those lines, another scene that I really loved was the subway scene where it is kind of playing with the or I guess, okay, going back to this new setting, one thing I really liked about this movie is that really kind of sets this apart from a lot of the other ones is we don't have the threat just being basically our heroes and the killers, and that's it. Like, there are huge crowds and people are just trying to ignore the freaks with the costumes and stuff like that, especially with it being set around Halloween. But, like, you know, people are doing horrifying things on the subways, and that's just New York because there's 8 million people, you know, cramming themselves into these subway tunnels. So, of course, weird stuff happens. You just try to ignore it and get on with your commute. And so I found that was very true as well, of, like, the subway scene where, you know, someone is terrified, they have been drugged, it's really trippy and it's dark and it's, you know, very upsetting, and then we have, you know, a character gets stabbed on the subway and, like, no one notices for a while.
Well, I would add to that too, Nathaniel, that the cinematography of that subway scene really was pretty unnerving and crazy. It wasn't just that someone gets slashed on the subway. These, like, passing lights back and forth and kind of reflecting on this Halloween party that's going on in the city, and some people are dressed up as Ghostface. So you don't know who the actual killer is. And then the lights kind of turn red and blue because they're underground, of course, and it's flashing and it's almost strobe-like, and you just don't know who is who to trust, and it's this awesome mind game that I thought was executed really well. In my opinion, that subway scene was the scariest part of the film by far.
I agree.
Everything else was pretty intense. It's pretty gritty, of course, but it's set up in these kind of predictable scenarios where you know people are going to die, you know people are going to have a knife fight or a gunfight or whatever. And that subway scene, I think, just really captured something that we haven't seen yet in horror cinema.
I definitely agree. I feel like it was one of those things where it really kind of brought me in as an audience member. I felt just as disoriented as the character, just as kind of scared in that moment as the character. Like, though I love this series, it doesn't scare me very often. That scene was one of the definitely not just for this film. I'd say that was one of the best standout scary moments anywhere in this entire series. That is just a genuinely, like, well crafted, really immersive scare, especially, you know, watching it in a theater that's dark, and it's just really just kind of pulls you into that moment of intensity, and, you know, you know there's a threat, but you don't know where it is, you don't know what angle it's going to come from, and it's just so well done. Yeah, just visually, the sound cues were also just as disorienting. The acting was good in that scene. Just everything about that scene absolutely slapped. That was a highlight of the series for me, honestly.
Another thing that I just adored is I am a sucker for a conjoined universe or a meta universe. I think it's a big reason why I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe so much. Is each story is its own story, but there's always a connection to kind of the bigger story, right? I love those Easter eggs. I do it in my own D&D writing. I think it's so fun, and it creates a sense of unity. So this film, they kind of harken back to all of these previous Ghostface killers and the masks that they used. And in a way, this also was really creepy and terrifying and up to the risk factor quite a bit. The original Ghostface mask that's kind of deteriorating and falling apart is just, I don't know, it was this nostalgic bomb, but at the same time scared you and brought something new to the franchise. Again, another reason I love Scream so much is they're always trying to push the boundaries and do something different for us. So this also led to like the penultimate scene where they go to this Ghostface Memorial Center and you see artifacts from all of the movies and screenplay and what are the word drawings of the scenes.
Well, and what I like is that it is this shrine to all of the ghost faces across all of the films in the series, as well as a lot of stuff referencing the in-universe stab movies. It's all there. There's the mask of every killer, and what I liked is like, one, that's like a really cool set piece, and made for some like really interesting fights between the heroes and the villains. That was really kind of fun and dynamic, and they couldn't just rely on running around a house. They had lots of props that they could work with and try to use to fight back, or would be new threats against them. But also, like, it that was really paying off everything that came before, right? Every time there's a kill all the way through this movie, the mask gets left, which is also a weird thing for Ghostface to do, right? They wear their mask as they're escaping, and in this case, a kill is done, and then they're leaving the masks, and each one has a different killer's DNA in it. So cool, because then it feels like this weird mystery that you're like, wait, like, okay, so who is this? How far back does this go? Is this tied to something from the earlier films? It ended up being kind of all tied to Scream 5 more than anything else, but the ways that it kind of had all of these fun visual cues to things across the entire series, especially the really old grody Ghostface masks, which looked real cool in those scary attack sequences. But it also just kind of created this opportunity where we kind of see the whole series on display as how the villains are interacting with our heroes in a really interesting way. But yeah, like the mystery was much more present in this film in a way that felt weird and trippy and kind of, I didn't know what to expect for most of it.
Yeah, I think you've alluded to this as well, that the number of killers also made for a fun, nice change.
Mm-hmm.
The cast, I mean, there were some pros and cons to the cast that we can talk about. Again, when the metaverse kind of comes into the world, I love a good legacy character and how they interact with the film. This iteration, however the word is pronounced, Max has had some alcohol. I felt was kind of a side piece to the actual plot of the story, and that's okay. We had Kirby come back, which was delightful. I love Kirby.
Yeah, she was definitely one of my favorite characters in 4.
Yes,
which is still an underrated gem of the series.
And in this, she was totally kick-ass and kind of lived by her own beat, and just really kind of freshened up this cast that we got from the previous film that were, all traumatized and dealing with this in their different ways and yada yada yada. But Kirby is there, so it's gonna be okay. Kirby knows what's happening. It was fun. I also really liked, whenever we talk about the Scream franchise, the directors and the writers always have this idea of flipping the script on itself and turning the movie into this meta kind of treaty on horror movies in general. And for me, I was picking up a lot of cues about the anti-movie. That this is, the 6th installment in the Scream franchise. And the villains' motivations were, to finish their child's original movie, and all of these other Scream movies were just kind of puppets in the real story of what's going on. And our exposition character, I can't quite recall their name, was talking about this a lot as well, that they're now entering a franchise. It's not a sequel, it's not a prequel, it's a franchise. So who the hell knows what's gonna happen?
By exposition character, you meant Mindy.
Correct.
The one of the twins, right?
So I love Scream so much for that, because I took my sister. She has not seen any of the other Screams, and the best advice I could give her is it's a horror movie talking about horror movies. And she didn't quite understand that when we went into the film. But at the end of it, she was like, oh, yeah, totally. I get it. This is awesome. And that's what Scream does best.
Yeah. Yeah, and it creates both a lot of humor and heart, and also, yeah, some like genuinely like great scares and interesting discussion about like what is horror and how does it work and how does it change over time and all of that. And along those lines, like I really did like how the cast from Scream 5 kind of developed and had grown from the previous film in interesting ways. I really liked that kind of core cast a lot in this movie. Like, I felt like in the previous movie, they were fine, but it was, you know, you spend the whole time kind of comparing them to the previous movie's characters and kind of, you know, not letting them kind of breathe and be their own characters. In this one, I did feel like they were much more cropped in. I'll kind of talk about some of the other characters a little bit later on in the podcast, but that kind of core cast, what did they call themselves? You know, so it's the Carpenter sisters and the Meeks Martin twins are kind of the four I'm mostly referring to, plus of course, you know, Gale in the mix. What do they call it? Like the core four? Wasn't that what they were calling themselves in this?
Yeah, I believe so, which made me laugh because at one point in high school, me and my girlfriend at the time, and you and your wife now, called ourselves the Core Four.
Or no, we were the Elite Six, because it was also
that is right. That's right.
Like the Pokemon Elite Four, but yeah.
Yeah. We didn't have serial killers chasing after us, but it was still a good time.
At least not that we know.
Maybe they were. Maybe that explains a lot about me.
That really does. Some other moments I want to talk about in this movie that I really enjoyed would just be, one, the cold open was a lot of fun. I mean, Scream cold opens are usually a blast. I especially liked this one because it had so many kind of layers of twists to that. Like, you know, I love that, you know, we get this Samara Weaving character who, I mean, one, you know, Samara Weaving, already, you know, a huge fan of her from all of her, you know, movies, that she's just a kick-awesome Scream queen, especially Ready or Not. But then, you know, she's this, like, film professor who teaches about horror movies, and she's just trying to go on a date, and then ends up, you know, getting killed by, surprise, one of her students wearing a ghost face mask, and you know, and that was fun in and of itself. But then that wasn't really the cold open kill, though. The real cold open kill was then that the student who killed her gets killed, and how that all played out, and us kind of saying, hey, there are ghost faces that are basically orchestrating other ghost faces. That really kind of grabs you in ways that a few other cold opens ever quite do. And so it was awesome and fun, and, you know, it was great to see some actors that I enjoy in interesting roles, but then have kind of some twists and turns right from the drop.
Well, and two, again, I can't reiterate this enough, Scream is so good at taking something that we're all familiar with and then being a bitch and saying, like, nope, just kidding. They did it through all of the other films. You know, sometimes it worked better than others. This cold open, when it first started, I was like, wait, what? They're killing it right away? This feels weird. What's going on? And then it was this, you know, film student kind of getting at their teacher, and they kind of revealed it all very quickly. And again, I was just like, I don't get this. Why are they going this direction? And then bam, all of a sudden we find out that, there's a real killer that we're not going to find out right off the bat. And so it was like this double take crazy attack on the idea. And it is hard to have a franchise, especially a horror franchise. And Scream just keeps delivering, especially the last 3 films, in ways that keep us surprised, engaged, on our toes. They do a good job. Samara Weaving, you are a horror icon. We love you. Please be on our podcast.
Oh, I would die. In the best conceivable way. Yes, please.
You would die. I would do necromancy. We'd be fine.
Oh, okay. Well, there we go.
I just got some graveyard dirt from my local occult store, ready to go.
Why not just go to a graveyard and get your own dirt?
Because that sounds sketchy, and I want to buy my graveyard dirt from respectable businesses. The irony of my vanilla occult life, Nathaniel. Don't think about it too hard.
And definitely don't make fun of it too much. I'm just saying, there's graveyards freaking all over the place. You just grab some dirt.
But then I would feel bad about it, because who is poor, Ethel von Wagner's dirt that I'm stealing? If Witchfire Moonbeam does it for me, then I feel definitely less bad.
It's dirt.
It's how I sleep at night. Let's move on.
Can we also just talk about one more little moment?
Always.
Just when we have, all of the ghost faces revealed in our final confrontation, when they all clean their blades at the same time. Oh, that moment, like the whole crowd, I remember when we saw that in theaters, everyone was just like,
yeah, pardon my French. That was fucking awesome. Horror moment to the max. Just like this iconic scene that we've seen throughout the years, all at once. Ugh, it was awesome.
Yeah, it freaking slapped. Is there
freaking slashed?
There we go.
See what I did there?
Yes, I do, and I appreciate it. I'm proud of you.
Oh, thanks. Hop off, sis. That's what the kids are saying.
Is it? I teach high schoolers, and I've never heard that before in my life.
I think it's from Fortnite. Don't quote me on that.
People still play Fortnite?
Yeah, I love Fortnite now.
Oh, so once all of the teens abandoned it.
Yeah, it's a very much a Facebook situation.
Ah, okay. You're
Let's
just
get
old.
Let's get back on the subway to New York.
Okay, was there other stuff that you wanted to talk about as far as things that really worked in this movie?
I do have to give credit to the acting. I think everyone showed up in phenomenal ways, especially the Queen of the Night right now.
Jenna Ortega?
Yes, my gosh. I just finished White Lotus and I wanted to say Jennifer Coolidge, and I knew that was not the right person.
Definitely not. No, those are very, very different people.
Lord have mercy on my soul. She does so good, and she plays spooky fun in the best way, and she needs so much more credit than she has, I think.
I don't know. She's kind of going through a time where she is on all of the pedestals and deserves it because she's freaking rad.
She love her. Be on our podcast.
Yeah, I mean, really anyone in any Scream movie or anything like that, please just be on our podcast. It would be freaking rad. But, well, good time. We'll be friends.
Yes. Let's maybe dive into a few of the things that didn't work.
Yeah. So, first,
everybody gets accepted to New York University?
Yeah, everyone. No problems whatsoever. They're all at the same university together on the other side of the country. No one had any problems getting in. It was great. Everyone's living in New York together. Every important character. Yeah, that's a bit of a pill to swallow, I will admit. I mean, I'm willing to swallow it because I felt like it was worth it for the journey, but that does always kind of irk me a little bit. Just the whole time I'm like, but none of this should really be happening because, let's be real, that's just rarely how life ever works.
I think it's one of those things where it's fine in theory, but then when you're sitting there watching it, it starts to kind of just... I don't know. It
like grates on you over the course of the movie.
Yeah, because who in the world has done that, you know? Even you and I, best friends for years. I think we're coming up on like 2 decades of friendship.
Mm-hmm. We
went to different colleges. Not because we didn't want to go to the same college, but that's just kind of how life goes. And so it's fine because it's a movie, but it's a little unrealistic, which is sad because in World of Scream, they try and hold to realism pretty tight. So
yeah, well, and I will say, it isn't even just that they're all in New York, but it's also that like most of them are living together.
Yeah,
and they're always just together. And you're like, okay, yes, but also New York is a tremendously huge city, and most of the characters are in college, and so it's hard to have all of schedules working out quite as neatly as all of this. And I was just like, it was everything, all of the stars lined up real nicely for all of these characters in really convenient ways.
Yeah, definitely agree with you.
And along those lines, similar kind of thing with how kind of our final act twist sort of plays out. A lot of it is that the bad guys, and again, it's Scream. They hang a lantern on it. They make a joke about it, but like they too have too perfectly ingratiated themselves into the lives of all of our heroes. It was flawless in a city with millions of people. They had zero problems getting close to this specific group of people.
Well, and like there was no thinking that people... I just... Nowadays, to get a roommate is a pretty complicated process. There's a lot of background checks and everything. And these girls who were in the previous film, I feel like would have taken that pretty seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And they were just like, yeah, you can come live in our apartment. It's fine. We don't know a whole lot about you, but we used a fake Craigslist ad, so we're fine. It just was kind of hokey. Hokey.
Yeah. And that these two siblings who don't look anything like each other conveniently, or anything like their brother who was the villain from the previous film, or their dad who also doesn't really look like any of them, they're all involved. There's no red flags whatsoever. There's no point that they accidentally kind of reveal any information about knowing each other or having any inside jokes or history together at all. And also, conveniently, these two siblings have managed to ingratiate themselves to both sides of the group. One is roommate with one batch of our team. One's a roommate with another person. No problems. And like their motivations and stuff. Okay, so this is a cop, and he's doing all of this because he's mad that his son got killed. Like in some ways that worked, right? Like in terms of just access to things that he shouldn't be able to get his hands on. Yeah, that happens all the times with law enforcement. And a lot of things work out because this character's a cop. This villain's a cop. Okay, I'm okay with that. But also, it just, I don't know. It pushed all of my suspended disbelief just a little bit too far outside of its box of my suspended disbelief thresholds.
Well, and it's weird too because even if they have accomplished this task of infiltrating these two friend groups, it's another kind of component and layer of absurdity, because they would have to, these friends that they're infiltrating have to be chill with them coming in. What if my roommate, and I get this guy and he's kind of a dick and I don't like him, and the plan is foiled and this guy has to figure it out another way. It was too easy.
Yeah, and also, like, it's not like these characters seem to have that much in common with our core group. Like, one of them is just, has a different guy over every night and is just kind of like the
info.
Yeah, exactly. And so, like, she doesn't seem like she would be someone that I personally would love having as a roommate, because, especially when you're trying to study, you don't want those sounds coming from the next room constantly. And then, I don't know, just like there was a kind of a lack of commonality, and they're like, we're friends because we're roommates. No, I've had a lot of roommates that I wasn't friends with, or I was warm acquaintances with at best, and I also had some roommates that I hated their guts and frankly would not care if they were my roommate. If I was in a life or death situation, they'd get locked out. So
yeah, so again, I think a lot of kind of these micro moments of the film did not execute as well as more of the macro plot that was going on.
Yeah.
I'd like to use micro and macro when I critique horror movies a lot lately, because it helps me appreciate the good of the film, but then also leave some space for what I think could be better.
Mm-hmm.
And, as a critic approaching this film, a lot of these minutiae kind of were silly and gross, but they didn't affect the overall macro film, and so I'm okay with it, But that doesn't mean I can't gripe about it. People can hold space for two opinions.
Yeah. Along those lines, so we didn't have that many new characters in this film, which, again, weird considering that this is on the other side of the country. But yeah, so we only have a kind of a handful of other characters. Most of them are villains, it turns out, and are kind of cartoonish in various ways, which was a little bit weird, because our main core group have been really fleshed out. They feel really strong as characters, and then we have these new characters, and all of them kind of feel cartoony, and so it's kind of hard to care about them as they're either getting killed or turned out to be the villains. And so that was definitely a weakness, because I usually, look at a Scream film and go like, oh, well, like, I really like this new character and this new character. There wasn't really anyone left to like other than Sam's boyfriend, I guess. Everyone else is dead, or was the villain, and then is dead. So it was kind of weird, because it really didn't build onto the potential cast at all, like most Scream films do. And yeah, the characters did. I wasn't emotionally invested in any of the other characters, really. If I haven't seen them in a Scream film before, I kind of didn't care if they lived or died.
Yeah, really, in the two main characters too. Jenna Ortega, I felt like, had a much more compelling progression in her story.
Mm-hmm.
The sister, though, towards the end, I still don't quite understand what they're doing. Where she's the heir to the first Ghostface, and because she's his daughter, she's inherited this bloodlust. Like, sure, we could get into the discussion of nature versus nurture, but it's not like some, I don't know, some seed that gets passed on from father to child. Still don't know where they're going with that, and I'm okay that I don't know where they're going with that. I just want some direction. At the end of the film, she picks up the ghost face. She ultimately kind of throws it away right at the end. But they're alluding to, like, something nefarious and malicious is about to happen with her.
Yeah.
And it just kind of undermines the Scream. The heroes are the heroes, unless they're, of course, Facade is the villain. But the heroes are the heroes. Let it be that.
Yeah, it definitely seems like they really, really want us to think that she's going to turn into a villain in one of the next movies. And I think then, because it's Scream, they're going to, do a fake out, and you know, the whole time we're gonna think that Sam Carpenter is gonna be the villain in Scream 8, but then it'll be Tara. Just to, I don't know, like it feels like they're forcing it a little bit too hard in a way that just kind of feels weird for the series. I don't know. Again, I love this movie, but they are doing some stuff and setting up some stuff that I just don't really feel like works for me as a very big fan of this series. Other things that, again, I had to suspend my disbelief a little bit too much. With the level of brutality of the killings and all of that, no main character died.
Yeah. Again. And it was gritty, it was intense. I don't know. I have this new pet peeve of mine where movies like Scream or even the Marvel Universe, where they, hell, even the Star Wars sequels, where they think someone's dead and then they're not. And I'm tired of it. Kill him or don't kill him. You know, the emotional risk of having one of your main characters die makes me much more invested in what's going on, especially if it's a character that I like. You know, for example, if Chewbacca really had died in that last Star Wars film, I would have been livid and hated Kylo Ren and his boys far more than I did once I found out it was like oh, psych, we can't kill Chewbacca because he's invincible. I don't know. I'm getting tired of it. Kill your characters or don't.
Yeah, and like I will give it that, like, this is pretty much the only Scream movie that hasn't killed off a major character. And so I'll give it that. Like, that in and of itself was kind of a twist, but it also just, again, I've been fed too many things that are kind of outside my usual suspended disbelief, that on top of everything else, I just like, this just feels really forced, guys. Like, Gale and the twins both are all pulled through just fine after getting stabbed. Okay, the Carpenter sisters are both fine, you know, minor wounds. It just, I don't know, it just felt like the end of Scream 5 again. The last thing that I have as kind of a big critique of this one is that, so a lot of the plot kind of hinges on this idea that people are continually pointing to Sam as this, like, oh no, she was the real killer in Scream 5. You know, that like... the internet conspiracy or whatever. Yes. And I on one side, I appreciate what they're doing. They're making some good critique of things like QAnon and how people will believe anything if it's on the internet and all of that. Like, I get it. It was a little bit too much on the nose how they presented it. You know, it's like, oh, hey, random people on the street will just come up and scream at her now. And I'm like, I mean, okay, yes, that sometimes does happen to people, but there was just a little bit too much of that. And like, I don't know. It's one of those things where maybe it is, in fact, pretty grounded in reality, because apparently people actually need real evidence. No, they don't. They don't need any real evidence to believe any nonsense on the internet, hence all of the QAnon stuff. But it just, I don't know. In my writing and consumer of storytelling brain, it felt a little too easy, and also just a little bit too on the nose in terms of satire.
Yeah, I think it's important that we talk about this kind of bullcrap that happens in the world. QAnon.com, you know, Green King's podcast does not support the conspiracy theories found on that website.
It's on 8chan is the website.
Regardless, we believe in science and facts and, you know, good things. So yeah. I understand that it's kind of a epidemic whatever word we want to use in the United States right now, where you get one tidbit of information and then all of a sudden understand cosmos in a way that other people can't. Whether that is a religious side point, environmental with climate change, we landed on the moon, whatever. But there is usually a progression. There is, they want to call it evidence. It's not evidence, but they want to call it evidence. And it kind of goes through a process. This film, it was just like a few ornery people on TikTok started this, and it exploded to strangers throwing like a milkshake at her in the park. It went from like a 30 miles an hour to 120 real quick.
Yeah, and like, okay, yes, I buy that the villains, this was part of their whole scheme and stuff, whatever. But yeah, it was just, it was a bit much. Though, going back to you listing conspiracy theories, wait, so you mentioned the moon landing as a conspiracy theory, and the conspiracy there is that the moon exists, right? Because you don't believe in the moon, do you?
I actually believe that the moon is a flat disk, and the Earth is
flat moon,
and we're actually not rotating, and the moon isn't rotating either. But the flat Earth rotating makes the moon appear. It's just like an ornament in the fucking space-time. Oh, don't get started. I can't even have a moment of satire because I hate conspiracy theories so much.
They are a lot. So, how do you rate Scream 6 in terms of screams?
As far as screams go, it is gritty, it's intense, but it's a slasher film, so a lot of the terror and the screams are rooted in that serial killer kind of motif. So I give it a 5.
Okay. I give it a 6. I think really it being higher than a 5 is really just boils down to the subway scene and the ladder scene. But yeah, I'll say scarier than most Scream movies, but probably scarier than all other Scream movies, frankly. But at the end of the day, slashers don't really scare me that much. However, let's talk about crowns as far as ratings go. I give this movie an 8. I really, really enjoy it in spite of its somewhat glaring flaws.
Yeah, I think sometimes when we're critiquing films, people kind of hear our critiques and think we hate the film, right? Or we have a terrible time watching the film. My partner and I have gotten into conversations about that where I'll point out some things that I really didn't like, and he's like, well, did you like the film at all? I'm like, well, yeah, I had a blast watching the film. And so with that in mind, I gave it a 7. I think it's a really fun film. I want to own this, a physical copy. I've recommended it to a lot of people who want a good horror film. But again, it can be a fun horror experience and not be perfect, and that's okay.
Yep. Yeah, that's definitely how I feel as well. So Max, how are you staying spooky?
Oh my gosh, so many things. Some simple ones real quick is I've started rewatching the Attack on Titan anime. I had watched the first season a long time ago when it first came out. I had forgotten nearly all of it. Really enjoying it. If you want a gritty, bloody slasher, hack and slash kind of an anime, this one does a very good job. And then I also have been binging a podcast called The Hidden Podcast. This is a reporter and her criminal psychologist husband kind of dissecting modern day true crime events. I love true crime, but sometimes we get stuck in the 60s, 70s, and 80s because that's when the world was really killing everybody.
I blame all of the lead paint and asbestos.
For sure. But one of the stories they're doing is very near and dear to us Utahns and Idahoans and Arizonans, which is the Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell case. They are kind of diving into the trial and a lot of new evidence that's being pulled out. And then also, because he's a criminal psychologist, he's trying to kind of psychoanalyze their childhoods and the methods of how they could have gotten to what they got. And it's opened a rabbit hole. I've been obsessed with this trial for the last 2 weeks. It's nice to put it on while I'm packing, because I gasp and no, oh my gosh, as I'm packing and duct taping boxes, which makes the process a lot more fun.
Yeah, no, the real horror is the experience of moving, because moving is probably my least favorite thing ever. So I'm glad that you have some good horror to help you get through that.
Yeah, I don't mind moving. It's kind of all the organization. Like, okay, we have to have everything done by this day, and then take it all and move it by the next day, and that and my project manager brain struggle with. So, because things don't ever go the way they should.
Oh yeah, no, everything breaks and nothing works out how it's supposed to.
The last thing I really want to push hard for me staying spooky is a Netflix film called I See You.
Which I watched last night.
The less you know, the better.
Yes.
And I was blown away with this film. It went places I had no idea. It's not perfect, but for me, best horror film of 2023 that I've seen so far. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I like I said, I watched that last night at your recommendation, and I quite enjoyed it. I don't know how I haven't watched it in the 5 years it's been out, but yeah, it's a lot of fun. It had some really cool twists and turns that I did not expect, and I really quite enjoyed it as well. So also, we'll echo your recommendation there.
It has something that happens which has created a deep new phobia that I have, and it is not helped by the fact that I spend hours while I work watching home invasion videos and dashcam videos. So it probably scared me more than most people, but now I am very paranoid when it comes to locking my doors.
As you should be. Well, I've been staying spooky lately, mostly with video games the last few weeks. I know I've mentioned it previously, but I was very slowly making my way through The Last of Us Part 2. Finally beat it. Very good. Definitely got some let's just say, as soon as I hit those end credits, I'm like, well, I need to go have a good cry now. Definitely both of the games in that series really have some emotional journeys that they bring you on, and I definitely need to watch the TV series very soon.
It's very good. I just finished it.
Excellent. Yeah, it's been on my list for a long time, but I didn't want to try to deal with juggling playing Last of Us 2 while watching Last of Us 1 and conflating storylines in weird ways and all of that. But yeah, so I beat that and then immediately started the Resident Evil 4 remake, which just came out, and is freaking fantastic. I love Resident Evil 4. As if you go all the way back to our first episode, you'll hear how influential it was on my journey into just kind of getting into the horror genre in general. And so this remake that really makes it very playable for a modern console is just a freaking delight, and I am enjoying the challenge of the game. It's a lot harder than I remember it being in a lot of ways, but it's just great storytelling, great characters. It's a little campy, it's a little crazy. I love Resident Evil 4. It is such a freaking fantastic game. And now I just need to push myself to beat it in the next few days because Zelda comes out on Friday. So
yes, I've been playing the new Jedi Survivor, which is phenomenal, but also worried about beating it before Zelda. So here we are.
Yep. I mean, you can always play multiple games at once, but I'm already doing that with a few games. So I shouldn't I really shouldn't juggle Resident Evil and Fire Emblem and Zelda and Horizon Forbidden West all at the same time, but I probably will. I have a problem, guys. And actually, all of this is just secretly an intervention for myself.
It's the whole reason we've done this.
Yeah. 95 episodes of just to lead to this intervention moment where I acknowledge that I have an unhealthy addiction to playing more than one game at once because I like to just play all the games.
That's not a bad.
It's true. All
right, friends. We will be covering Evil Dead Rise, which we just watched. Wild and intense horror film. Lots to say about that.
Yeah, so go watch it like now, so then things don't get spoiled when we talk about it. Because hearty recommendation from both of us, I think.
Yes, it's a crazy one. But in the meantime, stay spooky, friends.
Stay spooky.
Need even more Scream Kings? Here's our obligatory shameless social media plug. Follow us on Twitter or Instagram at Scream Kings Pod. You could also email us at screamkingspodcast@gmail.com. Help us reach a wider audience of horror fans by leaving a review on iTunes or by sharing a link on social media. You can also support the show by going to patreon.com/Scream Kings. Stay spooky.